Espresso. Espresso is the concentrated shot that most other coffee drinks are built around. It comes from Italy, where baristas in the early 1900s worked out how to force hot water through finely ground coffee under real pressure, producing a small, intense pour, crowned with a layer of golden crema. The word itself simply means pressed out, a fitting description of the process. What sets it apart is how much flavor and caffeine fit into such a small serving, barely 2 ounces, yet strong enough to anchor a dozen other drinks. It's rarely sipped slowly. In Italy, it's often finished in 1 or 2 swallows while standing at the counter, a habit that still shapes how espresso bars operate. Many cafes today judge their overall quality by how well they can pull this single shot. Americano. An Americano begins with an ordinary shot of espresso, stretched out afterward with a measure of hot water. The habit is said to have started during the Second World War, when American soldiers stationed in Italy found local espresso too intense and thinned it into something closer to what they were used to drinking back home. It still tastes different from ordinary drip coffee, though, because underneath all that water sits the deep, roasted character of real espresso rather than the flatter taste of filtered coffee. Baristas usually pour the water in after pulling the shot, which helps the thin layer of crema stay floating on top. Over the decades, it's settled into a quiet favorite for people who want the boldness of espresso without drinking it all in one go. Latte. A latte pairs espresso with a generous pour of steamed milk, finished with only a thin layer of foam on top. Despite the Italian name, which simply means coffee with milk, the drink as most people order it today actually took its modern shape in American cafes during the 1980s. The ratio is what makes it distinct. Mostly milk, with the espresso providing structure rather than dominating the cup. That balance is likely why it became the drink that introduced so many newcomers to espresso-based coffee in the first place. Latte art, those swirled hearts and leaves poured across the surface, grew directly out of this drink, and baristas still treat it as a small point of pride. Cappuccino. Cappuccino splits its cup into 3 roughly equal layers: espresso, steamed milk, and a thick cushion of foam. The name comes from the Capuchin friars, whose brown robes were said to match the color of coffee once milk had been stirred in. It carries a stronger espresso presence than a latte, simply because there's less milk to soften it, and the foam gives the whole drink a lighter texture on the tongue. In Italy, it's traditionally reserved for mornings, rarely ordered after 11, since milky coffee is considered too heavy to follow a meal. That custom never really traveled beyond its home country, and today cappuccino gets ordered at any hour, in cafes far removed from where the tradition began. Macchiato. A macchiato is espresso marked with just a small dollop of milk foam, staying true to its Italian name, which literally means stained. Because so little milk is added, it stays much closer in strength to a straight espresso than to any of the milkier drinks people order alongside it. Some coffee chains have popularized a very different, sweeter version under the same name, layered with flavored syrup and milk, sharing little with the Italian original beyond its name. The traditional version remains popular with anyone who wants a touch of milk without losing the punch of the espresso underneath. Mocha. Mocha blends espresso with chocolate and steamed milk, landing somewhere between a coffee and a dessert. Its name actually has nothing to do with chocolate. It's borrowed from the port city of Mocha in Yemen, once one of the busiest coffee trading hubs in the world, while the chocolate itself was added much later as the drink evolved across Europe and America. Its appeal lies in that dual identity. Coffee drinkers enjoy it for the espresso underneath, while people who find plain coffee too bitter are drawn in by the chocolate. It's frequently topped with whipped cream, pushing it closer to a treat than a functional morning drink. Cafes tend to put their own spin on it, using anything from dark chocolate to sweetened cocoa powder, so the flavor rarely tastes identical from one shop to the next. Flat white. A flat white combines espresso with steamed milk, poured in a way that keeps the texture smooth and velvety rather than foamy. It originated in Australia and New Zealand during the 1980s, where baristas were experimenting with microfoam, milk steamed so finely that the bubbles become nearly invisible. Compared with a latte, it uses less milk and a slightly stronger ratio of espresso, giving it a richer, more concentrated flavor, even though the two drinks can look similar at first glance. It stayed a mostly regional favorite for years before international coffee chains picked it up during the 2000s and 10s, introducing the name to customers who had never encountered it before. Many baristas consider it one of the harder drinks to make well, since the milk texture is what determines whether it succeeds. Cold brew. Cold brew skips heat completely, steeping coarse coffee grounds in cold water for anywhere between 12 and 24 hours. That slow process draws out flavor without the bitterness that hot water can sometimes create, leaving behind a smoother, naturally sweeter cup once it's strained. Although it feels like a recent coffee shop invention, the method has roots stretching back centuries, with some early versions traced to Japan, where slow, cold drip coffee was being made long before it caught on elsewhere. Since it's brewed as a concentrate, cold brew is usually diluted with water, milk, or ice before serving, and it keeps well in the refrigerator for several days. Its rise in popularity over the last decade owes a lot to that versatility, fitting as easily into a summer afternoon as into someone's everyday routine.